Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. I got my logo back. I mean, we're on Radio Row. Luke is not here, and he's missing out on – and this is where Luke would be here, like, yawning and taking pictures, because I get to invite old friends on. Bruce Murray has been my friend for 24 years, 25 years. I'm going to tell you a story because I went to Chicago. The Ravens played in Chicago back in November, and I had a rental car, and a buddy of mine picked me up. And we went driving in Northbrook, and I said, I want to go to Techney Road.
Of course.
I want to go and see the scene of the crime, as I'd say. And I pulled up there, and I remember the first time I pulled up there, I went out to Chicago to see the Rolling Stones and to see the Padres play an afternoon game on the north side. And I met Mark Jenskow. You guys were on the air. You and Berger were doing radio, Mariotti, Matt Nahagian. And this is when I was just sending a newsletter. I wasn't trying to get a gig there or whatever. And a year later, I'm working on Techney Road. So, man, you're with Sirius doing the NFL thing. How many Super Bowls for you, man? I haven't green room you because we're anti-green room radio people, but this is 28 for me. I'm thinking it's 20-something for you, right?
I always think it's better not to green room because once you green room, then you're repeating the same content on the air and you don't get the same level of honesty. But I was thinking about it. My first Super Bowl was 97, excuse me. 96 season, 97. Patriots against the Packers.
Patriots.
Yeah, Patriots.
Yeah, that was the Bledsoe.
So that was in New Orleans.
Right.
That was in New Orleans. So
really?
that was 97. So that's 20. I don't know, 20. Now, I'd been to some previously in local radio, but not to cover them like this. So I would say from this standpoint, it's 97 would be the first. So that's 25 years.
How did you get your gig at 101 Sports? Like people would. This is my 31st year.
Yeah.
Kenny Albert was doing skipjack games.
Sure.
I was the beat writer. I was a newspaper guy. That's how I got. I never even listened to sports radio. I didn't like sports radio.
And so, by the way, a little background. There's a Kenny Albert story. So Kenny and I lived in D.C. I worked for the local radio station WTEM from 92 to 96, and Kenny lived in the same building with me, and I helped him move his big screen TV in through the porch doors.
The little apartment downstairs?
I
stayed in that apartment in 1994.
Well, I remember he had like one of those big monitor 50-inch.
It was like in Silver Spring, right?
By the way, he still – no, it was in Rockville, Maryland.
Rockville,
Maryland. He still has that TV. Here's a guy that can't – like one of those giant, weighed 8,000 pounds, helped him move it into that building.
Kenny Albert's responsible for my career. I mean, I had him on – my 30th anniversary was December 13th. A month and a half ago.
Yeah.
And Kenny came on, did 45 minutes, and we're telling old stories. So Kenny's in your tree.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Yes. Yeah. Kenny and I.
How did you get to TEM in 92 then?
So TEM in 92, my path to TEM in 92 was I started at WFAN in 87 as a producer.
For whom?
I produced overnight Steve Summers. The first, I was his first producer back in 87. And
not that you're not.
And then I ended up producing the Bill Mazer Show, middays from Mickey Mantle's restaurant. So when I
sat in that window.
Did you really?
Well, when we worked together, we used to do Mickey Mantle's.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I actually broadcast
sat
out
in
of
the
Mickey
window
Mantle's.
there with Gary Bettman. I sat in the window there with Joe Buck. I sat in the window there with Bert Sugar, lived down the street.
Bert Sugar.
Bert would come all the time.
Would come on and go two-thirds of a pun, PU. That was always his classic joke. I mean, I'll tell you, when I was working as a producer for Bill Mazer, we would sit in the window, and, Mazer was a legend. Everybody in New York knew who Bill Mazer was. This was when you could have local, sports legends. And I would literally sit there, and if a celebrity walked by, you could knock on the window. And they'd come in and sit down and do the radio show.
We did. Tony Bennett sat down with me. Regis Philbin was eating in Mickey Mantle's.
Regis.
And Lou Pellegrino grabbed me.
Lou Pellegrino.
Scott Farrell's over at Farrell on the bench. He's going to be coming on. Lou produced him for years, and Lou's like I have Lou on once a year just to talk hockey and catch up,
Well, two things. First of all, I'm still friends with the owner of Mickey Mantle's, a guy named Bill Lederman. Still close. He texts me he listens all the time, and he texts me almost every day.
Does he? I knew Bill. I met Bill. I haven't seen him in 20 years, but all that memorabilia, he was like, is he a restaurateur?
Not anymore. Now he's in real estate.
Okay, so that's all over.
It's all over.
I walked by.
Anymore.
My wife didn't know me then. I met my wife in 03, and I walked by what was Mickey Mantle's, and I said, I sat in the window here with Gary Bettman. I sat in the window here with, all these incredible people back at the Slash from Guns N' Roses and Denny Nagel. Oh, my God, we had good times in there, you know?
The thing I've always said, and I underappreciate this, and you're talking to a Yankees fan, is that, and my kids, like, you know how certain people historically become almost mythical in nature.
We got Babe Ruth in Baltimore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, exactly. So Mickey Mantle's like that. If you're a Yankees fan and you're a kid, like, it's just, you just say the word, it just flows out of your mouth, but you're like, did he really exist? And I would tell my kids, not only did he exist, but I worked in Mickey Mantle's, and probably once or twice a week in the summer, I never really appreciated this. I'd sit down and have lunch with Mickey Mantle. After our show, he'd wave over Mazer or he'd wave over Bill Liederman, and I'd sit and have a hamburger with Mickey Mantle.
But, the legend of him, and I met him one time in the 90s. He was in the dugout in Baltimore, whatever, seeing Camden Yards, when Camden Yards was Camden Yards. And he would come in for like this every year. Joe Slivka's dad, Frank Slivka, did this Thompson Sports Banquet where they would bring in the hit leader, the RBI leader, the home run. Every year baseball players would come in. Dave Winfield would walk into the bar or whatever once a year. And Mickey Mantle was a part of this. So he would come to Towson every couple years, him, Yogi Berra, like all Whitey Ford, those kind of types would come down the ball because Baltimore's such a great baseball town.
Yeah.
And I met him. He apparently was just such a lovely man when he wasn't drinking, right? Like literally, which
true.
wasn't
That's
much
true.
in the early days. But when you got to him toward the end of his life, he was a lovely man to probably sit and have a sandwich with at that point in his life, right?
Yeah, far better. His reputation was not the greatest, as you know. And he was still, there were moments when he was angry, but a far better guy than he was when he was drinking a lot. Yeah, no question about it. But, there were moments when, people would come up for autographs if he wasn't in the mood. Sometimes the interaction wasn't great. But it's just fascinating to be around people like that, no matter what the experience was like, if that makes sense.
Oh, my memories of Sporting News Radio, 101 Sports, and I did 3.5 years on and on, breaking in and whatever, and relationships with people like you. But it means something when I land in Chicago to go get a Pequod's Pizza because Lonnie Williams sent me up there.
I lived around the block from Pequod's.
God, it's so good. Tell people how good that pizza. And you're a New York guy. Did you not like it? It wasn't Chicago style.
No, it wasn't Chicago style. And I was always, you know how, like, depending on where you're from, if you're from Baltimore, you're a crab snob, right? You got to be a crab snob.
I'm a crab cake snob,
Yeah,
yes.
crab cake snob. So is my wife. She's from Maryland.
By the way, Maryland Lottery presents us. We're going to be bringing the crab cake tour back on March 4th.
There you go. So my wife, I met her when I worked down in D.C. She's a crab cake snob. Can't go anywhere without her evaluating the crab cake.
Right.
New Yorkers are like that with pizza. I hate to say it. So
I know that. I've seen the Jon Stewart shtick.
Yeah, I liked it, but it was not New York pizza. They tried. There was a better New York pizza place on Clark Street in Lincoln Park that I found. That was just a local guy who used to be from Brooklyn. I don't even remember the name.
If he's still there 20 years. You've been in New York like 23 years now or something, right?
I came back to Sirius in 2006, so it's now 16 years since I left Chicago. Yeah.
Bruce Murray's our guest. He was once my colleague. I think I've worked with everybody.
Aren't we still colleagues in some way?
Yeah, you're there and I'm here and Gannon's there. How's Gannon doing?
Gannon is good. He's good. Gannon there was a long hiatus. Some bands break up and then you get back together years later. So I worked with Rich when I came to NFL radio in 2013, I think. And then he left because the commitment of working, all week was too much.
This is like real work. People don't understand. 31 years. I told people, nobody's going to outwork me here. I didn't come to L.A. to get 82 degrees and sit in Santa Monica.
Right. A lot of people think, how hard is your job? You just talk, right? There's a little more than that. But so Rich, because he was working, doing the games for CBS, didn't want to work 7 days a week. So he took some time off. Now he's not doing the games on CBS. Came back this year. So we had a 7-year hiatus in between working together on NFL radio, but it's great to have him back.
All right, man. Let's just go one by one. You talk Ravens a ton. Dick Cass, 6 o'clock Friday night, press conferences, defensive court. Well, the Ravens have a lot to talk about. There's going to be a lot of things happening here where last year the offseason was good job, good idea, great idea. Running game, getting Ronnie Stanley back. Oh, Nick Boyle's coming back. They're going to be better than ever. And then everybody gets hurt. And I've called it like an incomplete, all the way through. But obviously there's some heads rolling. There's some change happening. And Harbaugh has groomed this young man, who I've not met, Mike McDonald, to be, this is his guy. And he's going all in on this guy. And it was his brother's guy. So for that, their management and the strategy, I sort of trust the process, as we would say, for what they're doing.
Well, you have no choice because they've got a track record that suggests that they will be able to transition out of one defensive coordinator, who, by the way, did a great job, into another. But it's until you see the results, what do we talk about? It's a results-oriented business. I think that they're in a fascinating period of time because, we were talking about it earlier. 3 years ago, when we saw Patrick Mahomes burst on the scene, we sat and looked at the AFC and said, boy, this conference is going to be dominated now for the next 10 years by Kansas City and Baltimore. Here's Lamar Jackson. He's got his first MVP, and Patrick Mahomes. That's it. Now all of a sudden there's Cincinnati and Joe Burrow, and there's Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills. Things are a little different, and all of a sudden the Ravens aren't that preeminent team who are now entering an offseason, which you would know better than I how interesting this negotiation is going to be with Lamar Jackson and how much that's going to change the dynamic of the team from a financial standpoint. It's one thing to have the MVP under contract inexpensively. Now you're going to keep him in Baltimore for $45 million.
I still go back to the first night I sat in Canton when they put Ray Lewis in the Hall of Fame. We're 4 years back, and I refer to this all the time. I saw him run into linebackers, and I said, this isn't a good idea. There's going to come a season where everything's going to go to hell, a season where they might be 8-3, and he's going to run the ball 21 times against the Vikings and then go play like trash against the Dolphins 4 days later and then just be out. And they're going to go from 8-3 to 8-9, and there's going to be upheaval. And I would say your quarterback runs into linebackers. That's not a good business model. And that's why people veered off of that, and that's his instinct, and that's what he does when things go wrong. And things go wrong when first down goes wrong. When they're not in 2nd and 2 and 3 and 4, this is not a good plan. Running.
And I agree with you, and it will be interesting to see exactly what level of success they achieve going forward. But we can agree. I thought it was interesting when Lamar Jackson was drafted and we saw this offense, and John Harbaugh was asked about, are you uncomfortable because he may not have the career, he may not have a 20-year career. And John Harbaugh says, what's wrong with drafting a quarterback that plays for 8 or 9 years? And I think he was right when he said it. But now that he's suffered through this season, unfortunately, and the financial commitment comes after, and you don't have a choice, by the way. Anybody that's having this conversation about what should they do, they don't have a choice. They're going to pay him. Even they've admitted as much. But what kind of player do you get for the next 3 years? And how does that $45 million impact what you can do with the rest of this team, which really was built as a football team? Look, they're in a very interesting time in their development, I think.
Well, yeah, and also Eric DaCosta and his development and where John Harbaugh is on this curve of he's not going to be here forever. And we've talked as much about how long Bisciotti's going to own the team.
Why is that talked about?
Because he's disappeared. I mean, in the way that he doesn't take questions anymore, and he has missed games, and he's in the Bahamas, and and there's no. His kids aren't going to own the team. I mean, he's kind of made that clear. There will be a sale at some point. Right. He won't own. He's not going to die with the team, right, as other owners have. Right. So I think it's an interesting time, I think, for the franchise, for the city, certainly. And I've just left the city to move to the county. Bruce Murray's here. We've worked together for – tell me a bit about green rooming guests because, like, Moeller and I argue all the time. Don was my high school guidance counselor, then Baltimore County executive. He does a lot of work with me here. And he is a former PR guy, so he, like, wants to hand the notes out and do all that ish that I'm vehemently against. But green rooming, to me, is the worst thing you can do. After 31 years of doing this, I would think there's no way this can be any good if you hand someone a script.
Well, first of all, does everybody know what green rooming is? So green rooming is really dedicated more to talk television, where the guests would sit in a green room.
And the producer would come in and say what they're going to say.
Right, and sometimes the host would come in and interact with them.
I'm going to say this, you're going to say that. It's like professional wrestling.
Right, and interestingly enough, at Sirius, by the way, outside Howard Stern Studios, there's a green room where his guests sit, waiting to come in.
Does Howard Stern green room guests, really?
Well, Howard doesn't particularly. Gary will green room with guests, but the room where they actually wait in to come on the Howard Stern show is green.
I think there's a very fair point all these years into this, and I haven't had a lot of disagreements. There was I had a real disagreement when I was at Sporting News Radio with the woman who's married to Brad Paisley, who was in the Steve Martin movies, Kimberly Williams. She got really angry at me because she had been dating Pete Sampras.
Okay.
And this is up in Rochester, Minnesota. I'm doing a hockey event up there. And I don't have any regrets other than I hurt her feelings, which I didn't really want to do. But, like, they came on, they said, no questions about Pete Sampras. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
But I, like, was talking to her. We're doing a sports show. She's at a sports thing. I said, you attended Australian Open, French Open, Wimbledon. Like, talk about the, like it was literally like I wanted her to say, oh man, Paris, I went shopping and the clay was red and like whatever. Like I was trying to be nice, but like, so the green rooming part, I had at the New York Super Bowl, Jennifer Garner sat down with us, and I'm sitting and interviewing her, and my wife was literally holding the web camera like this.
Right.
And the handler came and like grabbed my wife's camera out of her hand.
Oh,
and like,
yeah.
we're on the set. And I'm like, it's media. What are you doing? So I guess when you don't ask what's acceptable or unacceptable, because we all have boundaries. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, people always ask me, is it okay to talk about your wife's cancer? I'm like, yeah, we like to, like talk about saving lives. But it's personal. So
Sure.
I don't have any problem with that part of the Gary Delabate coming in and saying, is there anything you don't want to, that you're uncomfortable talking about?
We do it. Listen, we do it.
Yeah.
All the time.
And I'm glad I do it in that way.
Right.
I had Slim Jim Phantom on to talk about Stratomatic baseball, right? The Stray Cats drummer, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And he was married to Britt Eklund, who I adored in The Man with the Golden Gun. And Rod Stewart wrote Tonight's the Night about her. And he just said, I don't want to talk about that. And I'm like, all right, dude. I mean, But if he did, it would have been a better conversation. And
sure.
And if I didn't ask for permission, and I might have pissed him off. But so I'm just thinking about what I do. But I don't green room anybody ever.
Yeah. No, I don't have a problem with somebody. Now, listen, there are times, I can't remember who it was just recently, that we were having a guest on, and boy, this is a sign of age. My producer said you can't ask about so-and-so.
And it was obvious that you should or no?
Well, it was obvious that you can't have the conversation without asking about that subject matter. If you were going to have the conversation and not, you'd look like the idiot.
Right. You can't make me not look credible.
Right. We basically said we can't have him on. We can't have the conversation. If he's not going to talk about this, say thank you, but no thank you. You're asked not to talk about Britt Eklund. That's something else. Like, nobody's going to go, I can't believe I didn't ask about Britt Eklund.
Yeah.
That's different. But to me, green rooming is when you sit down and you're in a break and you're 5 minutes away from coming back on the air, and there's a story you want to talk about, and you go, I'd love to ask you about this. And then they start telling you the story. I go, no, stop. Usually the first reaction you get is the best reaction because that's somebody being themselves as opposed to now having a rehearsed answer
Bruce,
and having
I've
to
done this 1,000 times where I'm like, no, you started to tell me where you were living. And I'm like, stop.
Don't tell me.
Don't tell me. Bruce Murray is here. You can give all the serious details where people, because you're like,
nobody cares.
You know what? Somebody wrote me the most beautiful note about Papa Joe Chevalier about a week and a half ago. I'm watching Nick Pavlatos over here.
Yeah.
I'm seeing all these.
Our boss.
All these sporting news, people and one-on-one sports people. And Papa Joe, who we all loved, who did the show after me, and I wrote a tribute to him after he passed. And one of his real friends in life, golf buddy, wrote to me, and we wanted to honor Papa Joe. So I have this online, One-on-One Sports has so I worked at One-on-One Sports page on Facebook. You're not on social media, man. Nobody can find you, dude.
No.
Where are you?
I like to be incognito. My memory of Papa Joe is this. I worked with Bob Berger, who's now retired, living down in Atlanta. And
he can bite me.
Yeah, exactly. So Papa Joe would always come in. I would say something that I thought was an attempt at humor, and Papa Joe would look at me and go, "You're not funny. Berger knows funny. You're not funny." And then he would walk out of the room. That was my interaction with Papa Joe. You're not funny. Berger, he knows funny. And that's the way that's the way it was.
My interaction with Papa Joe was I would come out at 5:40 Eastern, which was 4:40 Central. Where are you going tonight, kid? He would say, "That's pretty good, Papa Joe." So he knew. I was single at the time, and in Chicago on a bender without my kid. You going to see Madonna tonight, or you're going down to see Dave? You're going to see the Cubs, are you? So there's a little Western Pennsylvania in there too. So he would have his yellow notebook paper, and you talk about green rooming. I remember when George, who hired me at One-on-One Sports, handed me note cards with Brian Baldinger up at NFL Films up in Jersey when I did One-on-One with him, and I'm like, I don't read note. I'm not a television. I don't need a prompter. I'm
right.
Hi, this is Nasty Nestor Aparicio, and we are at the vault at NFL. Like, he was literally handing me note cards, and I'm thinking, like, I can't work like that, you know?
It's funny because I'm sure you get this all the time from anybody who finds out you're on radio. They'll say, how do you do an interview? Like, do you write all the questions down? And I'm sure as we're sitting here and there's nothing in front of you, I say the same thing that you would say. Do you write questions when you're asking if you're curious and you're sitting in a bar, do you have the questions in front of you? You just ask questions because you're a curious person. That's what you should do. If you're writing down things in preparation for this, you're going to miss something that's said.
Wise conversations, man. You can't have a good conversation knowing what you're doing, man. You know, like, so Papa Joe would write a script.
Totally. The whole thing.
And it was, and he would play the Star Spangled Banner or like whatever. He had a true monologue.
Yeah.
Like, you know, he looked at it like Jay Leno or Letterman, like he had to come out and say. And I did a monologue in radio every day of my life that was unscripted with my producer. And back in the 90s, people didn't talk to their producer much. Pharrell would do that.
Right.
At Sporting News, I didn't. Cliffy Saunders didn't have a microphone where I could like Robin Quivers, you know. I did that in my Baltimore life. I would talk to my producers, and they would mic in and tell me Joe's on line 1 or, you know, whatever on air.
Right.
That wasn't like professional radio back in the 90s to do that. So Papa Joe had a very 1950s, 60s like
approach.
Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah.
But he did pull it off, I will say. Despite his approach, he pulled it off.
Tonight on the show, we will be covering all aspects of the racism in Brian Flores. We will go coast to coast tonight. I love Papa Joe. So on June 3rd, we might do something for Papa Joe. Bruce Murray's here. He's a serious. He hides in the real world up in New York and eats great pizza and talks a lot of football. And what do you think of the game? Just give me 2 seconds on Burrow and Matthew Stafford.
You're looking behind us. Is the game behind us?
No, Stafford and Burrow.
Oh, you're looking at the pictures up there.
The giant mural here of Joe Burrow frightens Ravens fans. And I think we're afraid of the Bengals winning because they might really be good. He might really be really good.
Well, I think they are really good. I think you're going to have to deal with them for a while. I mean, think about the division that the Ravens are in. I mean, think about this for a second. It was always just it was, you know, you wake up in September and you realize the Ravens and the Steelers are going to battle it out. Cleveland, who cares about the Browns? I mean, they're going to win 2-3 football games. The Bengals, they may be competitive when Marvin Lewis was there, but they're not really a threat. And now the Steelers are going to be entering this uncertain time with Ben Roethlisberger retiring, and that is not a very good football team right now. And the Ravens are a team that's going to have to, you know, figure out their identity. The Browns, we don't know what the future has for them, but this whole division may be looking up at the Bengals for a little while. And if they're not, they're going to be in that mix. I mean, I think the Ravens will be competitive again. Too good with Harbaugh and Jackson. The Steelers, you just have an expectation that no matter what they look like, they'll win half their games. And I still think the Browns are going to rebound from a bad season. Baker Mayfield was struggling with injuries. But how different does that division feel, knowing that the Bengals are going to be part of this landscape for a while?
Well, I think the Browns have quickly gone from the, you know, head of class to bottom of school, you know, very, very quickly.
But you can't just show up on Sundays and beat the Browns. If they're healthy, they're still a good football team.
So you think the Steelers might be the worst team in the
I do.
Clearly, to go out with Mason Rudolph right now, they would be.
They are. Yeah, I do. I don't even think it's a question.
Well, the Ravens without Lamar Jackson were 0-whatever, right? I mean, literally, when you don't have a quarterback.
Correct. That's this league.
You don't have much in this league.
That's this league. I mean, you know, we talk about it all the time as the ultimate team game, but look at the teams that were in the postseason and look at who their quarterbacks are. And look at where they were drafted. Everybody always points to Tom Brady. No, you can get a quarterback in the 6th round. That's the exception. These two guys were the first overall picks. Patrick Mahomes is the first-round draft choice. Lamar Jackson, you know, first round. Lamar Jackson's a first-round draft choice.
I called it like a racehorse. I said Burrow to me reminds me, a little Papa Joe reference from the Kentucky Derby, reminds me of a Kentucky. He's a thoroughbred.
Yeah,
I mean,
he's a thoroughbred.
There's no doubt about that.
But look who's in the Josh Allen. Where was he drafted? You know, when people call our show, and I don't know if they do the other, go, I think we can get our quarterback in the 4th round. I'm like, good luck with that. Good luck. That's not the way this league works. And now your division has this guy. I still think Baker Mayfield rebounds. That's a debate we could have, but you got Lamar Jackson. To me, the Steelers are without question. I think Mike Tomlin deserves consideration for coach of a generation, considering he's never won less than half his games. With this team this year, how many games should that team have won this year? 5? 4?
Well, yeah, because Ben had
nothing
left. I mean, Ben had nothing left.
They were in the playoffs. That's Mike Tomlin.
Bruce Murray's here. You can hear him on Sirius XM radio. Even though they're D.C., he's in New York eating the good pizza up there. And appreciate you visiting, man.
Hey,
I mean,
listen,
elbows
anytime.
up. Old
Anytime.
friends visiting here. This is why I came. People said, why you come out, wear a mask? Luke didn't want to be here. I'm like, I'm going to see friends. I've already seen a dozen friends. We've been here a couple hours.
You missed it last year.
This is how bad that L.A.'s gotten. They scraped the bottom of the barrel. I'm doing the Snoop Wounded Warrior. I'm doing the play-by-play for Snoop's Wounded Warrior game.
Oh, is that?
Kurt Warner's involved in this. Kenny Mayne's going to be my foil. He doesn't know it yet. But
have you seen American Underdog?
No.
I saw it on the plane.
I don't see movies.
Well, I don't see movies, but I was on a plane, and it was there. What am I going to do? We were delayed for 3 hours. You know, I have a hard time with movies where the guy playing the guy clearly can't play the game, but it's a pretty good movie.
All right. Well, movie review. You get all sorts of things at Sirius XM. And it reminds me of the old days and green rooming back on Techney Road in Northbrook, Illinois. Bruce Murray can be found at Sirius. You can find me here. I'm here all week. We're on a Radio Row. Wise Conversations. I got sponsor stuff. I got my Coon shirt on. I got my Maryland Lottery mask on. Taking the Crab Cake Tour back out on March 4th to Mama's on the Half Shell in Canton. I'm Nestor. We are WNST live from Los Angeles, California. I got to get Van Earl Wright to come on and say Los Angeles. I know he's out here. I'm Facebook friends with him, so I got to find him too. All right, we're back for more in LA. We're Baltimore Positive.